Man, isn't paleontology wild? Today, in my second paleo mini documentary, I'm going to share with you everything you need to know about the crocodile that essentially became a duck. You all know me. I love hybrids. The more bizarre and creative looking, the better. Heck, version 2, the antagonist of my original post-apocalyptic audio story, and soon to be published novella, is a hybrid dinosaur with the teeth and tooth structure of the Adestus and the armor of a Dunkleosteus. But unlike version 2, this crocodile is not a fictional hybrid. It looks like one, but it's not. This is a real crocodile that evolved a snout which heavily resembles a duck's bill. There are a lot of weird prehistoric crocodiles. There's a lot of weird prehistoric animals in general when compared to animals that exist today, but this might be the winner of that contest, at least when it comes to crocodiles. Thankfully, this animal isn't really a mystery. We have a good understanding of why it evolved to look the way it did. Now, if you want a real head-scratcher when it comes to bizarre extinct animals, look up the Waukesha butterfly animal and try to solve that mystery. This, however, isn't a mysterious animal that we don't even have a name for. It's just a crocodile with a duck face. Okay, that's enough hype. Let's get to it. And if you enjoy videos like this, I made a mini documentary about Orrorin, an obscure early hominid that raises some questions about our early ancestors. And I made a full-length documentary about the Loch Ness Monster, as well as one about one of the most frightening and obscure ghost ship stories in history. And in a few months, I will be making a big documentary about animals that existed throughout the entire Cretaceous era. So there's something to look forward to as well. So there's a lot to check out, and if you like dinosaurs and prehistoric life, my original audio stories feature all manner of prehistoric animals, so please check those out as well. They'll be linked below, and be sure to like and subscribe. Also, I know the Orrorin video got slightly more off topic than I intended to when I started talking about related topics and the era Orrorin lived in. In this video, I'm going to keep the focus more on the star animal itself, and won't have half the video about other related stuff. I will take a few minutes at the end to briefly discuss some other prehistoric crocodiles, just to give you an idea of how diverse they got throughout the ages, but the star of this video is going to be the title topic this time. Alright, let's get to duck croc. Anatosuchus itself is an extinct genus of Anatosuchii crocodilomorph. Anatosuchii, a suborder itself, existed from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous, and crocodilomorph is part of the Pseudosuchian archosaurs, which includes crocodiles today and their extinct relatives. Now I know that was a lot of names and a lot of families to keep track of. I said in my video on Orrorin how complicated human evolution was, and this is just as convoluted of a roadmap as well. Prehistoric crocodiles branched off into a lot of different groups and families, and many took unique forms and had a very diverse amount of lifestyles, each living in its own specific niche. Anatosuchus is a very good example of a crocodile evolving a specific trait to live a specific lifestyle. Anatosuchus gets its duck comparison because of the very duck-like snout and jaw on its face, and its name literally means duck crocodile. The comparison comes from the fact that the animal's snout is very similar to a duck's bill. It lived in the Cretaceous and likely used its peculiar snout to root and sift for prey in the shallow water along streams and rivers. This itself is not a very large animal, especially if you compare it to some crocodiles from today, and especially to some from back then. This was definitely not a dinosaur eater. The prey it ate were probably small fish or semi-aquatic animals. It was less than a meter long, only being 70 centimeters in length. This animal's ribs are straight on the atlas and the axis vertebrae, but the ones on the cervical vertebrae are short and the dorsal ribs bend down towards the belly. Unlike modern crocodiles, this animal doesn't have the sprawled legs they do, but rather it stands upright. This means it was mostly a terrestrial animal, though I'm sure it could swim as well, especially if it did sift around and hunt in shallow water for small prey animals, putting its duck-like snout to use like a shovel. I picture this animal using its snout kind of like a shovel on the water, pushing around rocks in the bottom of shallow Cretaceous streams. The shoulder blade, known as the scapulae, are broad but do not flare very widely at the distal end of the blade, which is actually tucked underneath the osteoderms. Osteoderm, the bony deposits forming scales, appear to have been present in the dorsal of this animal, indicating it likely had scales that resembled modern crocodiles. The humeri, the long bone in the arm that runs to the elbow from the shoulder, are very slender and have straight shafts. From these, it is theorized the legs were able to be held quite straight. The squamosal, a skull bone found in most reptiles, birds, and amphibians, were on the back and the top of Anatosuchus' skull. They are triradiate, which means they have 3 rays or radiating branches. These have slender anterior processes which contact the postorbitals, which is the area behind the eye socket, and then offset posterior processes which then dip down into the brain case. I hope some of you are biologists, because I did not understand all of that. That was a lot of scientific terms for a lot of very specific things. But I get the general picture. I do. I get the general picture. For such a little crocodile, there's so much going on with it. And I love that. I love that we are able to know so much about it, especially since it's such a small animal. And there are far bigger ones that we have way less of when it comes to remains. You know, the fact that we were able to get lucky enough to know this much about Anatosuchus is just incredible. And again, the fact the fossils we have are in such a good state, and we can learn basically about every single bone inside of it, it's amazing. So even though I don't fully grasp everything when it comes to each specific bone or formation or the biology of the animal, I've said it before, I'm educated in homeland security, not paleontology. I love paleontology, but I'm not an expert. I don't pretend to be. But that's also not an excuse to get information wrong. So I always make sure to double check everything. And all the information and all those terms were right, I just don't fully grasp all of them. But that's okay. You know, we'll cover some crocodiles in a little bit that we're not this lucky with, and we can't get this clear of a picture of. So I just wanted to take a moment to say how amazing it is that we are able to know so much about our little duck crocodile here. Alright, for now though, let's shift back to topic and we'll get to the paleobiology of Anatosuchus. Now to be fair, to call a prehistoric animal odd is a bit unfair. Sure, some of them might look strange from our perspective, but that's because we view the world from how the world is today, while they evolved to look the way they did to fit the world at their time. That was normal for them. If they were to look at us and not eat us, they would probably think that we were the ones who were odd-looking. As I mentioned, this animal is thought to have had a diet consisting of small semi-aquatic animals, and it likely caught them by wading into the water like a heron does today. Now, let's examine the skull and the jaws themselves. The lower jaw is U-shaped, and it has 21 teeth on each side. Anatosuchus' teeth have subconical crowns which curve inward towards the center of the crocodile's mouth. Most of its teeth were small, relative to its body, and most don't have much wear. Interestingly, this indicates that they weren't used very much when compared to some other crocodiles. Anatosuchus' largest teeth were found at the corner of its skull. And Anatosuchus also had a narrow alveolar margin, which is the thickened ridge of bone where the tooth sockets are, and combined with the rest of the skull structure, which for such a small crocodile is honestly pretty complex, created a square-shaped head. It's great that the skull, in particular, is so well preserved, as you can really understand a lot of key things about this animal and any animal when you get lucky enough for that. The premaxilla are flat and broad, and they form a straight line across the front of the duck snout of Anatosuchus. Each hold 6 recurved teeth which point backwards towards the back of the mouth. The maxillae, the upper fixed bone of the jaw and vertebrates, each held 19 small recurved teeth, and it was the largest and most expensive bone in the skull. Speaking of the skull, if we compare juvenile and adult specimens, the skull seems to develop its broad, flattened shape as the animal grows older. It also has long nasal bones. I know I keep saying this animal had an exact duckbill, and that's not exactly true. The snout just heavily resembled a modern duckbill, but it's obviously not, as ducks wouldn't evolve for several million years yet. Overall, the fossils of this animal that we have are very well preserved for the most part. I mentioned this earlier. And even the brain case of this animal is very well preserved. Here we go again with the complex paleobiology that I don't understand all that well. On each side of the skull, there are 3 eustachian foramina, the auditory tube of the inner ear. Anatosuchus also has a pair of crests which run between the quadrate and the pterygoid on each lateral side of the brain case. So, even though the fossils we have of this animal are limited, which is not an unusual thing at all in paleontology, we can still learn a lot about Anatosuchus. I said in my Orrorin video that I hope one day we find a skull of one, so that we can learn a great more deal about it than we could with just fragments of arms and jaws. In this case, it's the opposite. Out of the fossils we have, the skull is among them, but large parts of the body are missing. Though we do have the dorsal of the animal, and along with a few other bones from one specimen, which, like the skull, are preserved very well with a lot of detail and information that can be learned, parts are still missing. And maybe one day, we'll have the missing bits of both. One other part that we have is a very well preserved foot or hand. The forehands of this crocodile are very large relative to its size. There are 4 digits on each hand, with each having 6 joints in them. They also have long unguals, which are the claws at the end of each toe. We don't know exactly why or what benefit the animal got from this feature, but the claws on Anatosuchus were very strongly arched. It's just a little detail to make note of. Again, we don't know the exact reason why. The world Anatosuchus lived in was not like our world today. The plants and animals of Earth at the time were very different. The temperatures during the point of the early Cretaceous Anatosuchus lived in were generally warm. It was a warm time, though a bit of a cold snap is believed, or at least theorized, to have occurred around the Apitian-Alban boundary. The Apitian, the last age Anatosuchus is thought to have existed in, was characterized by dramatic tectonic, oceanographic, and climate and biotic changes. And its record is punctuated by oceanic anoxic events, which are basically periods of widespread marine anoxia during which large amounts of organic carbon were buried on the ocean floor under oxygen-deficient bottom waters. In this case, an anoxic event is when the ocean loses a lot of its oxygen, and this can be devastating for marine ecosystems. Similar events have led to mass extinctions in the past. I believe one of the most popular theories about the Ordovician mass extinction is that it was a devastating anoxic event in the ocean. Though these events in the Cretaceous might have had an effect on terrestrial animals to an extent, Anatosuchus was probably unaffected, as its fossils are from the middle of Africa, basically, far from the oceans. However, that doesn't mean that Anatosuchus had an easy life or lived in some lush paradise free from dangers. This little guy existed alongside dinosaurs so massive that they probably wouldn't even notice if they stepped on it. It also would no doubt have been prey for some of the animals that existed. I could see a dromaeosaur of some kind thinking a duck croc would look perfectly snack-sized, though I'm not 100% sure if dromaeosaurs existed in Africa during the Cretaceous. I think there's sparse evidence for them existing there in the Jurassic, but I'm not sure about the Cretaceous. Either way, my point is that this crocodile was so small, I could see it being viewed as a tasty snack for some of the smaller carnivores. The dinosaurs Anatosuchus shared its world with were the Tyrannosaurus, Nigersaurus, and maybe Lurdosaurus. One other dinosaur that Anatosuchus might have also coexisted with, and probably would have been in the vicinity of regularly given its likely aquatic animal-based diet, was Suchomimus, the crocodile mimic, a personal favorite dinosaur of mine. Niger itself was no stranger to dinosaurs, being home to large sauropods like Jobaria and carnivorous theropods like Afrovenator in the Jurassic period, millions of years prior, and dinosaurs would live in the country until the end of the Cretaceous period. Oranosaurus, Nigersaurus, also known as the dinosaur with 500 teeth, by the way, and Lurdosaurus were all herbivorous animals, and likely weren't much of a threat to Anatosuchus. At the most, they might have accidentally stepped on it if one of them didn't move out of their way when they came down to the riverside for a drink. I guess Suchomimus likely wasn't a big threat to Anatosuchus either. Anatosuchus was so small that it likely wouldn't have been worth the effort to chase one down. Though maybe it was hunted by juvenile Suchomimus. I could see it being a decent meal for one when they weren't much larger than a hatchling. Now, that's a speculative idea on my part, but it's one that I could definitely see being possible at least. The fossils of Anatosuchus were found by a team of paleontologists led by the American Paul Sereno in 2003, and they were discovered in Gadufewa, Niger, a country in north-central Africa. The animal's full name, Anatosuchus minor, is a reference to the small size of the animal. The holotype material of the species that was found included a nearly complete skull with an articulated jaw, which you would have seen on screen earlier in the video. Its superorder was determined to be of Crocodile, and the suborder is Anatosuchus. As I also mentioned earlier, it was determined that the animal lived in the early Cretaceous from either the late Epidian or the early Albian periods, probably putting it somewhere around 113 million years old. Based on other fossils we have found, we believe the closest relative to this animal existed on Madagascar. In terms of evolution and relation to modern crocodiles and ducks, the most recent common ancestor between the two is the base of the Archosauria clade, which was probably superficially similar to modern crocodiles. We don't have any fossils of this ancestor, but we have some that exist close to when it would have existed. It's interesting, though, that a crocodile would try out the duckbill look and use it millions of years before the birds ever did. I hope one day more fossils of this animal are found. It's a very interesting crocodile, and for now, all we have are the skull, jaw, and a few other bits, some of which you saw on screen earlier. Hopefully, one day we will find a nearly intact specimen to get a better understanding of the animal, especially since right now we can only infer so much information about it, and what we have is rather limited. I know we can get a lot from what we have, but it's still a long way from having a complete picture of the animal. But this is also why this is the point of these current paleo documentaries. I want to give the spotlight to these obscure and lesser known to the masses species, and I want to give them the spotlight and to show people more about these incredible animals. Prehistoric crocodiles are honestly quite the topic. There's so many different species and genus and forms they evolved into. Some are kind of cute. You know, one was doing its best to imitate an armadillo before armadillos ever evolved. And some are nightmare fuel and nothing else. Like butcher crocodiles. That's some scary stuff. And heck, one of the largest predators of the Cenozoic, which is the current era of Earth, and it started right after the dinosaurs went extinct in the Cretaceous mass extinction, was a crocodile. Baryonysuchus was perhaps the biggest predator of this whole era. Move aside grizzly and polar bears, this thing would have maybe eaten them. Maybe. Might have tried. If it was still around today, it would probably actively hunt humans like polar bears and saltwater crocodiles do. I'm going to keep this section short, but I'm going to talk about 5 different genus. And I want to give you an idea of just how different and diverse prehistoric crocodiles were to show the true biodiversity of each of just them as a whole, you know. There are so many evolved to live in totally different environments, lives, and lifestyles. So I'm going to keep the descriptions brief, and I would actually recommend Paleoanalysis' 2-part video series on land crocs for in-depth in some of these animals. He goes very in-depth in the history of prehistoric land crocodiles, and they were both very great videos. This section, exploring different members of the crocodile family, won't be half the video like it was in the Orrorin one. I'm going to keep these brief and just cover the basics so you get an idea of each one. Let's start with Quincana fortirostrum. Quincana has a terrifying set of jaws and a terrifying size to go with that. It's quite the package. Like, for real. Look at this thing. Would you be surprised if I told you it lived in Australia? This genus inhabited Australia from 28 million years ago to as recently as 10,000 years ago. When Fortisaurum was discovered, the partial skull was described as of unusual form because of the higher snout if compared to extant crocodiles. Lyle here was a serious predator, standing nearly as tall as a 5'9" human. In fact, it is thought to have been the top predator of Pleistocene Australia, along with the giant monitor lizard Megalina and the modern saltwater crocodile. I guess we know which one won out in the long term, but these guys would have been the 3 lizards of the apocalypse in the eyes of the mammals and other prey animals they ate. The teeth of this animal and the Quincana genus were very similar to modern extant crocodiles, though some of the teeth were serrated. Fortisaurum also had a deeper infraorbital bar, the lower margin of the eye socket, than modern crocodiles do. This genus was, at one time, thought to be entirely a terrestrial type of crocodile. This is due to the amount of remains that have been found in caves, the fact that they had a flattened tail, and their hoof-like unguals. However, today it is thought that they were actually semi-aquatic because many specimens have been found near waterways. Man, this guy really reminds me of the character version 2 for my book right now. Holy shit. Nature can be really scary. This semi-aquatic idea is still a matter of debate, and no consensus has been reached. Okay, as much as I'd love to keep talking about this genus, they are very cool. I'm going to keep these sections short. Again, I just want to give you an idea of the sheer diversity among prehistoric crocodiles. So many lived completely differently, evolved to look completely differently, and heck, some weren't even carnivores anymore. So, let's move on to the next one. I encourage you to research any of these more in your own time. There is a lot of really cool information to find. Next is Anatosuchus, a crocodile from your nightmare because it was tall enough to look you in the eye. Or, if you're a shorter individual, look down at you. As I mentioned, this might have been one of the largest land-based predators in the entire Cenozoic era. Bigger than a polar bear and a grizzly bear. Yeah, this guy isn't one of the pug-nosed herbivorous crocodiles of prehistory. This is one of the most nightmarish carnivorous ones of prehistory. This animal lived during the mid-Eocene, around 40 to 45 million years ago, until the Miocene, just under 12 million years ago. Anatosuchus is a member of the extinct genus Sebexid mesocrocodilian. What fossils we have are all found in Middle Miocene age rocks in Peru, and the Middle Miocene age rocks in Venezuela. When it was initially described in 2007, it was given the full scientific name Anatosuchus arviloi, with arviloi being the only species to represent the Anatosuchus genus at this time. Now, the fossils we have of Anatosuchus are fragmentary, but what we have consists of skulls. No fossils past the skull have been found at this time. The fossils we have, though, can give us a lot of information, especially when it comes to the size of this animal. The preserved parts of the skull are 70 centimeters in length. And the entire length of Anatosuchus, if you remember, was 70 centimeters. With The entire skull of this animal, believed to be over 3, maybe even close to 4 feet long, and consists of teeth very similar to the theropod dinosaurs of a million years earlier, with its teeth very well preserved and still sticking out of the upper jaw in some fossils. We also estimate the animal to be 20 to 25 feet long. This thing is just becoming more nightmarish the more I read. I've seen some estimates that put this crocodile at a staggering 35 feet long. Oh my gosh. This thing is just becoming more nightmarish as I read about it. A crocodile that long that stands tall enough to look you in the eye. That's scary. Nature is very scary. That's horror movie stuff. Why do these keep reminding me of version 2? You probably won't be surprised to learn that this is the largest known septicid. The weight of this carnivore we can only guess. However, from what fossils we have, and what we can infer from related species that we have more complete specimens of, we can calculate an estimated weight. And it's this estimated weight, even with a margin of error as high as 50%, that we believe it would be the largest terrestrial carnivore to ever exist in the Cenozoic, beating out any mammal predators for the last 66 million years. The paleobiology of this animal is a little hard to fully work out with how few fossils we have, but we know that this is a fully terrestrial crocodile and undeniably a carnivore. Most probably the top carnivore in its environment. I don't know if it would have coexisted with terror birds. I know they existed in South America as well. But if it did, I'd say the Phorusrhacids would probably have been Anatosuchus' greatest competition. Let's move on from a nightmare crocodile, before I lose my mind, to something that you won't expect for a crocodile. You've met duck croc, now let's meet armadillo croc. Anatosuchus. You know how sometimes in animated movies set in prehistoric times, they'll just make random animals up by mixing different ones together? That's what this guy looks like. Like someone just mixed an armadillo up with a crocodile. So what was this oddball crocodile all about? This fellow existed in the late Campanian to the early Maastrichtian periods of the late Cretaceous. The Maastrichtian is actually the last age of the Cretaceous before the KT extinction, 65 to 66 million years ago. This crocodile is believed to have been fully terrestrial due to its long legs, which are similar to other fully terrestrial crocodiles, and it was possibly even a burrower as well, like a meerkat. Because I love meerkats, I'm going to refer to Anatosuchus as Flower from now on. If you know, you know. Flower was found in Brazil, and dated to have existed sometime around 70 million years ago. Directly behind her skull, Flower had a thick layer of armor protecting her neck and back. Again, why are these crocodiles reminding me of version 2? At least he got armor from Redunculeosteus, so it's not exactly the same. At least this is a cute crocodile as well. Finally, something cute instead of nightmare-inducing. On Flower, the osteoderms, normal to crocodilomorph, are fused together to create a rigid shield of hexagonal plates, referred to by researchers as the cervical shield. This shield then loosely linked 7 bands of armor together that could move a little. Overall, this makes researchers think that Flower could tuck her legs up for protection, similar to some modern armadillos. However, they do not think she was able to fully roll up. Moving down to the tail, the armor researchers found here was typical for what we would usually expect to see on a crocodile. Okay, I'm done referring to her as Flower. We'll go back to its actual name. Anatosuchus belonged to the suborder of Anatosuchia. On its legs were large claws that are theorized to have been used for digging burrows or digging up food. It could probably use them for defense as well, but it also would have been able to use its wicked bite for defense too, due to its sharp teeth. Speaking of its teeth, examination of them has led paleontologists to conclude that Anatosuchus was most likely omnivorous. The teeth in Anatosuchus are a bit unusual. It had 7-centimeter long curved teeth which resemble canines, as well as protruding front teeth which resemble incisors, and the conical teeth with shearing edges filling the remainder of its mouth. This is such a curious animal to think about coexisting with the dinosaurs. It's not the kind of animal that comes to mind when you think about what was living at the time, yet it would have had its own little place in the world and was far from the most unusual animal to ever evolve. As far as crocodiles go, though, it is probably one of the weirdest compared to what most people generally think of when they picture a crocodile today. Next is a more traditional crocodile, but still an oddball. Anatosuchus, meaning pancake crocodile, is a stomachosaurid crocodiliform from the Cretaceous period, living between 100 and 90 million years ago. It's called pancake crocodile because Anatosuchus has an extremely shallow skull. This was another animal that lived in Niger as well as Morocco in the Upper Cretaceous between 100 to 66 million years ago. Pancake crocodile was first described in 2009, I believe by the same team that described Anatosuchus, which is cool. They found the duck crocodile, and they found the pancake crocodile. What a resume. We currently know of 2 species within the Anatosuchus genus, and both are represented only by their bottom jaws. Each side of the mouth had 24 teeth, which overall are evenly spaced out from each other, save for the 6th and 7th ones, the sockets of which, where the roots of the teeth are, have merged. Anatosuchus' teeth are theorized to have formed a type of natural fish trap due to how they were positioned. Both species of pancake crocodile would have been between 4 to 6 meters in length, most likely, with much of which would have included their flattened head. The jaws are not thought to have been able to be closed or opened with much speed or with much power due to the amount of muscle that would have been available to open and close them. It is believed instead that the animal stayed completely motionless for hours and waited for a fish to just swim into its jaws. The teeth would have basically been cage bars once the jaws were closed, though unfortunately in most fossil specimens the teeth are either missing or were in the process of being replaced when the animal died. Still, this sounds more like a placid crocodile. I'm sure it was a good hunter, and years ago I saw a documentary showing how it used its stay still strategy until a fish swims in to hunt, but it definitely doesn't sound like it would have been as aggressive as something like a saltwater crocodile today. Those animals are powerful and have insane bite forces and actively hunt humans if they decide that they're hungry while we're around. If Anatosuchus was around today, I'd say it probably wouldn't target humans and would prefer if we just left it alone. As I mentioned a minute ago, Anatosuchus was thought to be as long as 6 meters or 20 feet, with its flat head taking up more than 3 feet of the whole body length. The Anatosuchus genus belongs to the extinct Stomatosuchid family of crocodiliforms. And yeah, this is another one that we don't have a lot of fossils from, unfortunately. Just bits of the jaw, and we don't even have a complete skull. It's amazing that you can infer and learn so much from so little, such as this animal's hunting strategy, basically being a living fish trap with jaws full of spike-like teeth. Hopefully one day we will, the fact that we have so few fossils right now will change, and we'll have a more complete picture of this animal. Until then, I am going to move on to our last prehistoric crocodile of the video. I don't think I can escape this video or this topic without talking about Anatosuchus. So here we go. This is probably the most famous prehistoric crocodile, given how much art of it attacking dinosaurs, usually Tyrannosaurus, exists. Anatosuchus means terrible crocodile, which, fair. The skull alone was about 3/4 the length of an average person today, and the full animal reached around 32 feet long. Great, another nightmare crocodile to end off with. Anatosuchus is related to modern alligators and caimans. and it lived in the later stages of the Cretaceous, from 82 to 73 million years ago. Oh look, another species I'm not going to be able to talk about in the Cretaceous fauna documentary now. Yay, make my own job harder. Anatosuchus was first discovered in the 1850s in North Carolina, though fossils have been found in 9 more U.S. states and northern Mexico since then. And for a long time, even today, knowledge of the animal remains incomplete. But we found more fossils and do have an expanded understanding of this massive predator. And it is massive. When people think of crocodiles that ate dinosaurs, this is the animal that they are usually thinking of. Its teeth were built for crushing, and it's theorized that while this animal was probably capable of eating large dinosaurs, it probably also ate fish, sea turtles, and other aquatic and terrestrial prey, and likely was an opportunist apex predator that stalked the coastal eastern United States and the interior seaway that ran through North America at the time. Its back teeth are theorized to have been used for the particular purpose of crushing sea turtles. As I mentioned, specimens have been found in a wide range, but they're more common in the eastern United States. The 10 states that Deinosuchus fossils have been found in are Montana, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, New Jersey, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and North Carolina. Fossils have supposedly been found in South Carolina and Delaware too, but they haven't been officially described. Fossils from this genus are most common in the Gulf Coastal Plain region of Georgia, which is an area near the Alabama border. This animal also has a totally unique skull shape, not being found in any other extinct or living crocodiles. Now, I have to address what this animal is most known for in pop culture. Did it eat dinosaurs? Deinosuchus is thought to have employed hunting methods that you see in crocodiles today. It's theorized that it would wait for dinosaurs to come down to the water's edge and ambush them. Think how crocodiles in Africa will do the same thing with, say, a wildebeest. The animal is also believed to have been capable of performing a death roll, so it's possible that it could have drowned and eaten dinosaurs. In Deinosuchus's eastern range, no theropods, or any known dinosaurs, grew as large as it, which means it was likely the apex predator in the area. So did it eat dinosaurs? I'd say it's very possible. At the very least, Deinosuchus was probably capable of killing large dinosaurs if it needed to. And since they could live for 50 years, I can imagine it being a lifelong enemy to some dinosaur individual that has to drink from the pond it lives in every day. It'd be quite the story to think up. Okay, I will wrap this one up here. I addressed what everyone wants to know about this one, and I want to keep these sections short, so we'll move on. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to research this topic and discover some of this really cool stuff for yourself. You won't regret it. It's fascinating. So that was when a crocodile turned into a duck, along with a slew of other prehistoric crocodiles to show just how diverse and that they could get. It's interesting, though, that Anatosuchus evolved the way it did. It caught my attention as soon as I learned about it, and I found it, all the more interesting as I did research on it, and, I didn't understand quite everything when it came to the biology of the animal, but I understood the overall picture of it, and it is fascinating. Prehistoric crocodiles as a whole are such a diverse topic. I could probably make 100 videos covering 5 in each and still not cover them all, or all the different lifestyles they had. That's not an understatement. And if you want to learn more about these, I highly recommend you research the topic. You'll find some interesting faces looking back. I guess it just goes to show that nature sometimes can be stranger than any fictional creature that you can come up with. Though, to be fair, we have never found a dinosaur with Adestus teeth, or that kind of tooth structure, so I still get points there. There was a lot of different crocodiles, and they came in a lot of different forms. And, Madagascar is a good example of showing, just how diverse the crocodile family could get, with 2 of its land crocodiles, the giant carnivorous crocodile, name I'm about to butcher, Razanadragobi, and the tiny herbivorous land crocodile, Anatosuchus. They both called the island home. I think I got the second one pronounced right. My point with all this is that there's so many different varieties and forms, you'll inevitably find some that are just a bit odd looking. Litargosuchus reminded me vaguely of the Indoraptor of all things with its body posture, And Anatosuchus is exactly my point, though. It is exactly an oddball, but it evolved its duck bill to fit a niche that it could exploit, and it suited its way of life. Sure, compared to what we might imagine a saltwater crocodile, today, it's a far cry, but it's fascinating. Seeing all the ways animals would evolve to exploit the resources available results in some very interesting forms for paleontologists to riddle out. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the duck crocodile Anatosuchus, along with being introduced to some other prehistoric crocodiles that hopefully gave you an idea of just how diverse they got, with each having their own unique lifestyle. Anatosuchus would probably be seen as cute today, rummaging its little duck bill around in shallow river waters, while Quincana would no doubt send people running and screaming in the opposite direction. Prehistoric crocodiles as a whole are just cool, and I hope you see how, or at least you're beginning to understand how. Anatosuchus would go extinct around the early Cretaceous. Specifically, this little trooper would last, as I mentioned, either until the late Epidian or the early Alban periods of the Cretaceous. It would leave behind some incredibly well-preserved fossils that allow us to understand it, have a good idea of its lifestyle, and ensure that it would not be forgotten. With its fossils, in a way, we can give this little fellow new life and build a more complete picture of our planet's long, bygone, prehistoric era. And that wraps up the story about the little croc who could evolve into a duck. Anatosuchus was such an attention-grabbing animal for me, and I was just compelled to read more about it and make this video after I discovered it. It's not a dramatic dinosaur eater or a mighty land hunter you might think about when you think of the famous prehistoric crocodiles. Again, people today would probably see this little guy as cute. Now, I could see someone wanting one as a pet. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned some stuff. And I know I'm not an expert in this field. I'm just an enthusiast. And I do take great care to make sure that the information I research for these videos is correct and accurate, so that when I present it to you, I hope you're able to learn a little something, even if I don't understand exactly what every term means or what every bone, is called. But I do double check and make sure all of that information is correct. And I think that's what's important at the end of the day, spreading this information. And I didn't even scratch the surface when it comes to this topic as a whole. You want to look up Anatosuchus if you really want a head scratcher of a crocodile. And tell me, out of the 6 ones we covered, which one did you find the most interesting? I'd love to know, especially if you found Anatosuchus as interesting as I did. Anyway, if you're still watching, thank you, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Check out my other paleo documentary if you want to learn more about prehistory. It's in the documentary playlist linked in the description, and it covers the obscure early hominid Orrorin. If you'd like to see another video on prehistoric crocodiles in the future, I wouldn't mind returning to this topic sometime. Let me know, and I'll keep any feedback in mind. Also, let me know any fun facts about prehistoric crocodiles that you may know. And like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it. I love making these documentary videos, and since people enjoy them, I'm happy. It's one of my favorite niches on YouTube, and paleontology as a whole has so many interesting topics that we need more channels discussing it, because there's literal worlds of stuff that remain obscure, and I hope to see people research and share these lesser-known eras and animals in the future. There's a lot of great channels out there already, and hopefully more passionate people will come in the future. Anyway, my next mini paleo documentary will cover another slightly better known to the masses animal that is also notable for how bizarre it looks. I'm also going to focus on it entirely for the video. I didn't want half of this one to be dedicated to the other crocodiles, but it still ended up being that way. It's fine, but I'm not going to do that kind of thing for the next one. Here's a teaser for the animal that I will be featuring. The shark with a buzzsaw for a jaw. Alright, with that, I sign off for today. Have a good one, everybody.